Welcome, everybody, to the A-Slut Podcast, with the most electrifying man in all of podcasting, your host, the Opera Ghost. Now please, sit back, relax, make sure you enjoy yourself, and always remember, let's get A-Slutty. Find the A-Slut Podcast on all social media at the A-Slut Podcast. And please check out the website A-SlutPodcast.com or email the show, the A-Slut Podcast at gmail.com. And once again, please enjoy.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the A-Slut Podcast. It's a bisex, love, understanding and trust. I feel like I haven't said that in ages. It's always just been the A-Slut Podcast recently, but there you go. What's happening, my lovely little sluts? We're going to get a little bit more serious today, unfortunately. Well, not unfortunately, because it's something that needs to be brought to the attention a lot more. I talked with a counsellor who specialises in... Actually, I'll put a trigger warning here before we go through any more of this. Big trigger warning around sexual assault in this episode. We talk about it a fair bit. And Prag, who was my guest for this episode, is a counsellor specialising in that field. It's really cool to talk to her. If you're in New Zealand, there's some great things here that can help you out if you've been through this sort of stuff. Some really cool, really good information around how you can get that. But yeah, trigger warning, guys. If talking about sexual assault and rape triggers you, this is not the episode for you. Otherwise, do listen on, and as always, please do enjoy.
Step 1, chin up, look the part. Step 2, you weren't hurt in the dark. Step 3, what you crying about. Step 4, everyone knows you're lying, no doubt. Step 5, you were asking for it. Step 6, you're just afraid to take the hit. 'Cause we all know what you did last night. You were there all along, soaking in the spotlight. Something changed, my mind rearranged. I feel estranged. Something died when you were on top. My mind seemed to stop. My heart seemed to drop. But I was asking for it right. I was asking for it right. Oh, my dress was on too tight. If I didn't want it, I'd put up a fight. Oh, I was asking for it right. Oh, my dress was on too tight. I should have just put up a fight.
Okay, so before I introduce our guest today, I'm just going to put another little trigger warning here that we will be talking about sexual assault and things of that nature. So if you are triggered by that, might pay to skip this episode. I don't like saying that because I do love you all listening, but yeah, if you get triggered by that, maybe not the best one for you. But in saying that, I am delighted to welcome our guest, Prag. How are you doing, Prag?
Hello, I'm doing well, thank you. How are you, Simon?
I'm pretty good. I've just finished work. I've just gotten home. We're slapped onto the chair and we're strapped in, ready to go. So first, before we get involved, I always ask my guests to introduce themselves a little bit, because obviously my listeners probably don't know who you are. So tell us a wee bit about yourself.
So like you said, my name is Prag. I'm currently based in Wellington.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in India but grew up in New Zealand, so I have a very interesting view towards cultural worldviews, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So which actually comes in quite handy with my role as well. And I guess in terms of my job, I am a registered counsellor, and I also work with ACC for the sensitive claims unit as well.
Okay, so what's a sensitive claims unit?
So a sensitive claims unit is anyone that's been assaulted or abused or raped sexually. They can actually apply to ACC to get funding, to get counselling services through ACC.
Okay, straight off the bat, I didn't know that. So that's really, really good to know.
Well, yeah, it's so important. I try to spread that word around. So if there are anyone, ACC does have a few rules around it. The sexual assault, rape, etc. Needed to have happened in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it happens overseas on, like, let's say, like a trip or, one of those, like, I don't know, uni internships or whatever you do, on the basis that what am I trying to say? Like, if you are meant to be coming back to New Zealand,
mm-hmm.
they can still cover that. But if it happened overseas before you moved to New Zealand or something like that, unfortunately, that doesn't get covered. However, that is something very important for people to know, that, if you have been assaulted or raped or anything like that, you can apply for funding through ACC to get you some counselling and therapy work.
That's awesome. I'm actually really glad to hear that, because like I said, I didn't know, and I kind of pride myself on knowing these sorts of things so I can help people out, but that's really, really great.
Awesome. Well, there you go.
Yeah, there you go indeed. So how did you get into getting into helping people who've gone through these sorts of things?
I guess, like, my interest in psychology kind of started from a very young age. I didn't actually realize there was such a thing as psychology to begin with, because coming from the Indian background that I was in, it was very much a, one or the other kind of a path, which was either you become a doctor or you become an engineer. I do remember when I was 7, someone asked me, I think it was a family member that asked me, so Pregna, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I don't know what I want to be, but I want to do something where I'm helping others. And then they were like, oh, great, so you're going to be a doctor. And I said, oh, okay, cool. So my journey kind of, I guess, took me through to Otago Uni to do the health sciences to hopefully get into medicine kind of a thing.
Yep.
But I also had a very strict upbringing. And so this was my first year of freedom. So I kind of let loose a little bit and didn't do so well in my first semester papers, like, at all. Well, for people hearing out there, I failed all of the papers.
Oh, wow.
I know, I did. And I was like, whoa, okay. And then I was looking around at some other papers that I could do, and psychology was one of them. I was like, okay, cool, let me do it. And I did it, and I actually, I fell completely in love with it. And I realized one of the reasons I didn't actually do well in the other papers is because I genuinely just wasn't interested in the human body as much as I was in the human brain. So there you go. That's kind of how it started with the journey of psychology.
I mean, I'm kind of into both of those.
Well, yes. I wasn't really, but in terms of the study of it, the ins and outs, I'm more about, like, how people think.
Oh, the ins and outs too.
Yeah, oh, well, there you go, Simon. You should get into it then.
I'm all about the ins and outs.
Aren't we all?
Of the human body.
Well, yeah, so that's pretty much how I got into it, really. And in terms of the topic of the area, throughout my 10 years of study, which I do not recommend to anyone, by the way, it was just too hard, I've actually grown up in an abusive family. And so I've always wanted to provide a voice for others who felt like they couldn't speak out for themselves. So I wanted to tackle all the topics of taboos, like things like domestic violence, things like sexual abuse, things that people just don't for some reason, talk about. And I'm a firm believer in thinking that we should talk more about it. We should, make these things more aware to everyone so that we can actually do something to stop it. Because ideally we will head towards a world without any domestic violence or sexual abuse or rape or things like that. So I'm trying to do my little part.
And that's why I wanted to bring you on today, so that we could spread as much information and that sort of thing about these sorts of topics. Because I've done a little bit in the past, and there's going to be a bit of a series on this topic, which sounds quite bad. But I've got a plan for the next few episodes around this sort of culture and stuff as well. So it's going to be pretty heavy, but I think it's going to be very, very informative, and it's going to be nice and fun about it.
I think we shouldn't avoid the topic just because it's heavy. Like, it's because it's heavy that we should talk more about it.
Yeah.
People going through it feel really alone. They feel like there's not many people out there that understand their position, things like that. And I think it's important to build a community of survivors and supporters,
Yeah, absolutely. Especially considering it's becoming a bit more, I guess, I don't want to say prevalent, but it's out in the open more. People aren't so worried about how people are going to react to them when they have been assaulted or raped or whatever. People are more willing to talk about it now.
You'd think that people would be more willing to, and I mean, I guess it depends which era you're kind of comparing it to, because in terms of my experience with it, there is still so much taboo around talking about sexual assault and rape, even just abuse in general. And yes, I think the generations that we're coming through, they're doing a really good job in building up that kind of platform where people can speak out, which I think is really amazing. And the people that do are so, courageous and strong. But I do genuinely feel like there is still more work that we need to continue doing to make it seem like that people are okay going to counselling when they need to, and don't feel like people are judging them because they are wanting to get therapy. It should be just as normal as going to the doctors when you're sick.
That's such a huge point for me. I don't think people look after their mental health as much as they look after their physical health. And this is a huge part of that. If there has been a traumatic event in your life, then that doesn't go away easily, does it?
No.
I'm not going to say you need to try and work through it, but I think for a lot of people it's best to work through it with somebody who is an expert in that field, who has that knowledge to be able to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing, just a side note, is another thing people get kind of put off by with counselling is, they kind of don't like the idea of a complete stranger hearing, their ins and outs and all their deep, dark secrets. But I guess one way to look at it is you're getting like a non-biased third-person point of view. And it's not, and actually, to be honest, any good counsellor shouldn't be giving you advice per se on how to live your life. They should be helping you, facilitating through your journey. That's another big thing, because I've had a lot of clients who come to me and who had come to me and then said, oh, look, I've tried counselling before, it didn't work, but I'm wanting to give it a go again just because, I've got stuff to deal with. And usually those are the good, the ones that actually wanted to persevere because they recognized that it was actually the lack of rapport that was the issue more than the actual act of counselling. Do you know what I mean? While there are a lot of friends of friends who are kind of like, oh, no, I've tried counselling, it doesn't work for me. And it's like, well, I think it's because a counsellor might not have been a good match for you. Yeah. So it's really important to know that you can actually shop around until you meet someone that you feel very comfortable with. Because obviously in a counselling situation, you will be challenged when you're kind of diving in deep of all these trauma and different things going on for you. You will be challenged. So it's so important for people to select a counsellor that they feel really comfortable with and that they know that they can trust, and I think that's something that, again, needs to be spread out a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your role, there's got to be some parts that are quite nice and some parts, obviously, that aren't so great to deal with. So what are some of those for you in your role?
Okay, let's start with the not nice ones and then finish with the nice ones.
I like that.
So not nice parts. It shocks me with the diverse range of people that are affected by sexual abuse and rape. Sometimes, I have young teenagers coming in or even, range pretty much everywhere really. I can't really give you any percentages of what age group would be more than the others because I think it's everyone and anyone can be affected, unfortunately. And it's hard hearing stories about child abuse. It's hard hearing stories about, people that have been betrayed by people that they trusted, things like that. So that's probably the hard part of the work, is actually hearing so much evil. And you're kind of listening to the stories and you're kind of just like, wow, how can people do that, kind of a thing. However, saying that, the good part of the work completely makes up for it. And for me, that is quite genuinely looking at like all my clients, and they are absolute inspirations, I always get emotional when I talk about it, like, because I genuinely mean that. Any person, for me anyway, in my experience, as soon as they walk through the door, I know that they're already a fighter. You know what I mean? Like any person that is willing to face their demons and work through whatever it is, I think it's like amazing. I think that to me tells me already as to how much hope they already have in their life and for their life.
Yeah.
And in my sessions normally I like having a bit of a joke, and, I like having a bit of a laugh. And, there are some serious sessions that we have, and even throughout that seriousness, we're able to have a good laugh. And that, to me speaks about the strength of human nature. And you know what, that's what keeps me going. When I see clients who are just kind of like, oh, I was able to do this today, and I couldn't, I was able to get out of bed properly and actually have a shower, and, the excitement that they feel at like actually achieving these kind of goals for them, which would have, at one point would have been unthinkable for them.
See, I think there's a great example of that. Sorry to cut you off, but there's a great example of that in an episode of Sex Education. Where one of the characters gets felt up on the bus and masturbated over and ejaculated on, and she wasn't able to go on the bus for such a long time until she finally told her friends what had happened. And they were able to all work through it together, and they all ended up on the bus at the same time at the end of the episode, and she was much calmer with that. That's the kind of thing you're talking about here, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's definitely about the community that you have and the support that you have, but also just individuals recognizing their own power within themselves. I think that's a big thing. And the episode that you mentioned, it is a really good episode because
great episode.
Yeah, it explains the process quite well without having to go into the details of it. And just sexual assault and rape and things like that, they change your worldview. They break your trust in humanity sometimes. They break your belief in yourself, your identity. Everything kind of gets broken down. It's pretty similar to like a mental breakdown. And people actually working through that and kind of figuring out who they are and the fire that they have within them, like, I think that's just so inspirational,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's the amazing part of my job.
Yeah, so I guess the start of the journey would be the hardest, right? Because they've come in, you've just met, and you're going through what happened and actually hearing what's happened to this person. But as you're going on, you're seeing these people grow and become almost flower, I guess, towards the end.
Definitely. The thing with with my work is it's not a necessity for people to tell me about what happened. Because the way that I guess I do my work, and that's worked well for me and my clients so far, is that, I kind of just check in with where they're at the moment and what they're hoping to get from the counselling. Because I don't like going into it with, preconceived ideas of what I think is good for them or, what I think they should work on or anything like that. Sometimes my clients, don't actually even need to talk about what actually happened, because if it's something that they don't really want to deal with, then that's fine, I worded that wrong. It's not that something they don't want to deal with. That's something that's not the highest priority for them, is to be able to talk about it, then they don't have to talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of interesting to see just through the journey of them, just of their self-discovery and self-confidence and everything. I've had people who wanted to tell me what happened, even though it was, there wasn't any context to it. They were like, look, today I'd like to tell you what happened, purely because they felt really empowered in being able to share that and to be able to, talk about it. And I think that's awesome.
And that's really cool.
So whatever it is, I think people need to realize that, I think it's helpful for people to realize that counselling is there, for you and for your,
growth,
for your, whatever that is, And it's important to know that, you shouldn't feel pushed into talking about anything, or you shouldn't feel uncomfortable. Of course, it's like I said, challenging, but it shouldn't be like you're forced to say something, or you have to talk about it, you have to talk about that, or anything like that. So please, for anyone listening, if you are feeling like that in a session, please do speak up about it, because that's not very healthy. And obviously there's different contexts to each experience and etc. But just in general, I think trust and comfort is so important in that relationship.
Absolutely.
Especially for, sensitive topics such as sexual abuse and rape. So, yeah.
Yeah, I could not agree more with that. That's... Yeah, super important, because, if you don't feel comfortable with somebody, then you're less likely to be open to what's going to happen throughout those sessions. And I really like the fact that you ask what they're looking to get out of it, because that gives you sort of, I guess, a focal point to aim for lack of a better term.
Absolutely.
As opposed to just doing a big general sweep, you're sort of focusing on one part to get to. And that's obviously going to be the most important thing to that person that you're with, the client that you're with.
Absolutely. No, that's very important. Yeah.
So that's really, really cool. We're going to go into a couple of statistics here in New Zealand. Okay, so we're a country of approximately 4 million people, right?
Yeah.
I hate reading these because it makes me really, really angry.
Yeah.
In 2005, there was an estimated 317,000 sexual offences committed.
Isn't that just disgusting?
It was reduced in 2013 to 186,000. So that's all right, I guess.
Yeah.
But that is then. Let's put it this way: in that 2013, where it's considerably lower, it's still 5.2 sexual offences per every 100 adults. It's 5%.
That's ridiculous, man. Yeah.
It's just absolutely. And this is probably the one that scares me the most, right? In 2005, 9% of sexual offences were reported to police, compared to 7% in 2008. So there's a lot that's happening that isn't actually getting reported to police.
Yeah, and I could probably say a few comments about that as well.
Yeah, go for it, please.
It's really difficult for clients to report sometimes, not because of the actual act of doing it itself, is like, there's a lot of psychological issues that people usually work through to be able to acknowledge, first of all, that they've had an assault done against them. And that's a big journey in itself. But also, unfortunately, with the way our law is at the moment, you really need evidence. And in sexual abuse cases, it's not always easy to get evidence. And that I personally think, and I'm not like being political or anything like that, I just personally think laws and stuff do need to change a little bit around that to make it more accessible for people who've had assaults done against them to be able to report it. And also with the time frame as well. It's not the first thing that someone thinks about after getting raped might not be to immediately go to the doctors and get some evidence.
No,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely not. There's a lot of trauma that's just happened.
Exactly. And, I think it's important to kind of keep in mind as well. And this does play with, I guess, with victim blaming, about being like, oh, well, if it was rape, then why didn't you report it, immediately? It's like, it's not just as simple as that. It's not like someone stole your purse, it's a whole lot of like psychological hurdle.
It's a mental anguish, really, isn't it?
Oh, it is, absolutely. And, you have to go across and jump over so many hurdles to even accept that something like that has happened to you. Because, again, like I said earlier, it really questions your whole worldview, And, yeah, I think it's just important for people to realize that. And I do believe that laws need to change to kind of accommodate for those psychological aspects as well.
Absolutely.
Again, I don't know how, personally.
Yeah, see, that's a difficult part of that, though, isn't it? Because you don't want to go so far as to, okay, you've reported this, now it's 100% that's what's happened. There still needs to be a lot of room for investigation of it after it's been reported. But it does need to be taken a lot more seriously, that's for sure.
Yes. And I want to say this as well, is that it also needs to be taken very seriously no matter what gender you are.
Yes, absolutely.
Because that really needs to be more acceptable for people of any gender to report sexual assault, and not feel like they're going to be judged for it.
Absolutely.
Or that their identity is going to be ripped apart just because they're,
And with New Zealand's culture, it is quite difficult for a male to go and report that they've been sexually assaulted.
Absolutely. And it breaks my heart, really.
Yeah.
Because it does happen. Yes, of course, unfortunately with the statistics, it is more gendered.
Yep, we're about to go through that, actually.
Oh, okay.
I've got some statistics in front of me about this. Okay?
Yep.
So, in 2014, 15% of adults had experienced one or more incidents of sexual violence at some point during their lives. Women were more likely to have experienced one or more incidents. So 24% of women compared to 6% of men.
Yep.
Just think about that, though. A quarter of the women in our country has experienced an incident of sexual violence.
Yep.
And 6% of men. And I want to put an asterisk next to that 6% because I get the feeling that even both of these actually.
I was just about to say, they're funny that you mentioned it. I
they
was going to be
report it.
the people that actually report it.
Yeah.
It
It doesn't say here whether they've been reported. I think it's just a bunch of people who have actually responded. So it's not a all-encompassing part, but it's still scary numbers, I think.
It is, absolutely. But just think about this. These are the people that actually responded. So if you actually included all the people that haven't responded, or
I think that number's higher.
I think it's way higher than that, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think it's quite scarily high. Because it's the range as well. There's a lot of people out there that think that they haven't been, they've never been sexually assaulted until they realize that they have.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
It's just, yeah.
See, and this is where the whole thing around what is sexual assault, right? A lot of people, especially dudes, honestly, don't realize that what they're doing is a sexual offense or an assault.
Yeah.
Because the next stat that comes up on this list is that women are also more likely than men to have experienced distressed sexual touching, 22% to 5%. Now, distressed sexual touching, for me, that could be getting felt up in a bar while you're dancing.
Yes.
That is still sexual assault.
It is, absolutely.
The episode of Sex Education that we were just talking about, masturbating on somebody on their clothes, they haven't physically touched, but it is still sexually assaulting someone. Hell, you could even argue that an unsolicited dick pic is sexually assaulting someone.
I would like to say that it is sexual assault to be able to send pics of unwanted nature.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to put it out there, just because, I'm assuming the reason dick pics actually happen is because maybe that person or that individual is thinking that, hey, if I was to get a random picture of boobs or whatever, I would really like it. That doesn't mean that the other person is going to like seeing a picture of your junk. Okay, just putting it up.
Absolutely. See, it's not difficult to ask if they want to see it.
Yep.
And just by that, though, asking can be a little bit awkward, but it's also consensual, which makes it a lot nicer. But if you're on Tinder or something like that, don't have that be your first message to someone.
Yep.
Hey, want to see my junk? No.
Yeah, no, exactly. But this is the thing, I think people need to take rejection not as a personal attack, but just what it is. And it's okay, that person's not interested. Cool. Nothing against you as an individual, nothing against, beating up your identity of who you are or your macho-ness or whatever it is. It's just that person's not interested, and I think that's a big part in that, is that, people freak out when they get rejected.
There could be a multitude of reasons for this as well.
Yeah.
It's not just that they don't like it. It could be the situation that they're in. It could be that they're completely asexual. It could be, they've just broken up with a boyfriend.
You know what? It could even just be the fact that maybe they want to be surprised by seeing your junk and reel. It could just be that.
That's fair too.
No, I'm just saying, well, I don't mean surprise in that way.
I know what you mean.
Yes, sorry about that. Should have made that clear. But it's important to know, I think, that it could be many reasons. And just because you're taking it as a personal attack, doesn't mean that's actually what it is.
I think that shows a large amount of immaturity as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't think of the word that I'm looking for. Not just immaturity. Nah, it's gone. I can't think of it. That's all right. It'll come back to me once we're finished. Yeah. I guarantee. But that's cool. So, yeah, just thinking about that, 22% of women have had distressed sexual touching. Okay? Mm-hmm. We move on to the next one. And these next two are the scariest ones for me. Okay? Mm-hmm. Attempted forced sexual intercourse, 11% of women compared to 2% of men.
Yeah.
That's 11 in 100 women that have had somebody attempt to rape them, basically.
That's just 11 too many, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And 2% too many on the men's side.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And that's the attempted side.
Mm.
The stats for actual forced sexual intercourse, exactly the same.
Yeah.
So not attempted, the act has actually happened at this point.
Mm. It's scary, eh? Like when you actually let those numbers sink in.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
And also bearing in mind that these are statistics which aren't usually are like the average number. You know what I mean?
Mm.
It's probably is quite a bit higher than that.
Yeah, I would think so too.
Mm. It's very sad, very scary.
Yeah.
But that's also why I think we all need to talk about it more often and make it, more approachable to people to be able to talk about these topics.
Yeah, for people to be more open to talk about it.
Mm.
In the knowledge that they know that it may help them in the long run if they're talking about it.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
So we'll move on from that a little bit because that was terrifying enough. Now, we won't go too far into detail on this next one, but what does a typical case for you sort of look like? What's the process, I guess?
The process, okay. So I guess in terms of the process, it will be slightly different compared to private or ACC referred clients. Just another point of the ACC referrals, they do need to go through an organisation that is approved to be a supplier. So these are the terms of it. So you can go onto the ACC website and check for what organisations there are that are suppliers for counselling. Mm-hmm. And those suppliers usually have a set of providers, like the counsellors, who are able to give you that service. So normally you go through an organisation, so the umbrella organisation that kind of puts you through to a counsellor. So I guess in terms of the actual procedure, with ACC, as soon as you start seeing a counsellor, the counsellor applies to ACC to what they call an early planning procedure. You should get allocated around 6 hours of face-to-face time to kind of get to know your counsellor, work through the report and things like that. And after that, you can have a couple of options. So you can either go the long way or the short way. So they're called short-term or long-term. Short-term is you get 8 set hours with no extension or anything like that. And that's usually for people that have maybe like a more goal-oriented kind of reason for counselling. Mm-hmm. So it could be things like, look, I want to work on, how to recognize healthy relationship, so that could be all that they want to deal with, and so that could be 8 sessions. Obviously, sometimes, depending on the person, it could be longer, but anyway, that's the short term. The long-term option is, as the name suggests, for people that are wanting more long-term support, and that could be for, so actually to go through that, you do need to go through a supported assessment. Now, a lot of people get really anxious about the supported assessment, so I just want to put it out there to people. There is no sexual assault that will be considered to be too small. Mm-hmm. I just need people to know that, because that is something that I have so many clients who are going to be like, oh, what if they think it's not big enough or, enough of an assault? And I kind of breaks my heart a little bit, really, that people do feel this way. But so far, the support that ACC has provided for clients has been really amazing from my point of view. And I think there will be support for people who have gone through assault or rape or whatever it might be, because it is more about how that assault has affected you and your life.
Yeah.
It doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't matter what happened, because it does, but it's more about the impact on your life right now. And if it is impacting your life right now, you're entitled to get the support. And hopefully you'll get a really awesome counsellor that will work with you and, in a way, write out the reports supporting you. Can't talk, right? So that's kind of the ACC side of things. So with the long-term one, after there's assessment, there's a process of reporting and, collecting notes, blah, blah, etc. In that meantime, you'll still be seeing your counsellor. It's just the background paperwork will be happening. And long-term approval can be up to 48 hours per year.
Right.
And as you work through with the counsellor, obviously there'll be updates and reports and things that you'll have to work through with the counsellor for ACC, because obviously it is a government-funded kind of a service. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's all about working with the counsellor. I would like to say that, no one should feel alone during this process. And that's why I'm saying hopefully your counsellor will be there to explain this process to you and, support you through that.
Right. Okay. So I think a lot of people think that it's always going to be a giant process, and that's why they're quite, I guess, torn in two minds whether to actually go through and try and go through therapy. But there are other ways to go about it.
Absolutely. The first thing that you do, for the ACC process, is literally you obviously meet with the organisation, meet with the counsellor. There may be a wait list, because there is a need for more counsellors and therapists, etc., for the sexual violence field. But once you meet with the counsellor, the first report that you do that sends through to ACC, pretty much telling ACC that you're working with a counsellor, it probably only takes 15, 20 minutes, depending on how much information you want to put in. And then it's just getting to know the counsellor. That's pretty much what it is. And like I said earlier, that's the time where you can actually see if you get along with the person, if that's the person that you actually like talking to and, you feel comfortable in that space, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not actually too difficult for the client to be able to apply for it, which is really good, because I think they've done a really good job in actually making it accessible for people.
Mm-hmm. Right. Really, really interesting, this. I'm actually just enveloped in all of this, and I'm trying to wrap my head around a lot of it as well. Yeah. Basically, it's try and get help, and it's not as big of a thing as you think it is the TLDR version of that, isn't it? So the next point I wanted to come across to is I'm very much on the kinky side of things. All of the people who listen to this know this by now, if they've listened to more than one episode, I think. I've done a little bit of research into this, but I'm going to go into it in depth a lot more next episode. But there's been a couple of parallels drawn with BDSM and therapy as well, for seeing a counsellor. Sometimes it can, and a lot of this depends on the counsellor involved. Absolutely. Because, jinx. Because a counsellor who's not open to this idea will shut it down, and it'll just be a negative experience for everybody involved. But there is a number of articles that suggest that BDSM can actually help for those who have survived a sexual assault. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it can help for people because the idea of BDSM is pretty much the foundation is consent. And to be able to practice, consensual kind of an act, I genuinely think can be really beneficial and therapeutic. Obviously, it doesn't mean if you're not interested, you have to do it. That's not what it means. But if you are, in a trusting kind of a relationship with someone, and I don't just mean like a full-on relationship or anything, just that kind of connection with someone, I think can be helpful for people that want to explore it that way.
Yeah, and a few of the key points that come up through this is taking back power, I guess, especially for those who might have a fetish around consensual non-consent, because they're in charge of that action. And I think the key point that you put into this is it needs to be done correctly. If you're going to go down this path, it can't be some half-assed in quotation marks dom or daddy that sits there and just thinks that he makes all the rules and that everything is done to his standards and things like that.
Yeah.
That's more likely to go the other way, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think it could cause more trauma if it's not done right.
Mm.
It's actually quite interesting because I've actually had clients who prefer BDSM interaction more than, sex or whatever it is that's not connected to a scene play or anything like that.
And this is a huge thing just on itself, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
BDSM play does not always include sex. I need to put that in there because I think that's a big misconception.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I get two completely different things from each one.
Yeah, and it's the thing, I think the whole idea around BDSM, I don't think is mainstream knowledge. Mm-hmm. And I do believe it is one of those things that needs to be provided as being more mainstream knowledge because it will provide another resource to people, and when going into something like, kind of dominant sub kind of a play, I think people need to know their research and they need to kind of explore that area before getting into it, especially when they have triggers, for different things that could be linked to some of the acts that you might do. And you're absolutely right in what you said earlier about, if you just go on to like a dating app and someone just says, oh, hey, I'm a dom and, come over and I'll, dominate you, it might not always work out in that way because obviously the underlying foundations need to be that kind of trust and the, the caringness and everything that you have in a BDSM, a good, healthy BDSM version that you might not get with a random who claims that they can do what you want them to do.
I also want to state in there that it's not just, don't use kink or BDSM as therapy. Do it alongside your therapy so that you can relay it with your counsellor or with your therapist. Mm-hmm. And making sure that everybody's on that same page and everybody's comfortable with how it's going and what's happening. Because if you go off and try and do it just on your own, there's a whole manner of different things that can happen.
Mm-hmm. Please use the resources and the support that that is there. It is there. Please do use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been talking about for a while about me coming up to Wellington and doing a bit of a workshop. Workshop. Yeah. Workshop's probably the best way to do it, to talk about how these things are intrinsically linked and how it can be a positive thing. I've just pulled up a Vice article. I think Vice is fantastic. They have so many articles that just sort of sit there and go, actually, this is about right. And I'm quoting it directly here. It says, when approached with care, respect, and in tandem with more traditional methods like talk therapy, Lissa says her journey into kink has been transformative. Quote, BDSM has been nothing but a positive addition to my life and my healing. I've experienced many sexual traumas in my life, and before I got involved with the kink scene, I had no concept of healthy boundaries, sexual empowerment, or even my own worthiness for pleasure and consent. Leaning into physical pain on her own terms and under her own control, she's come out on the other side feeling strong, sexual, and seen. Now, the two key points in there, I think, is the own terms and under her own control.
Yes.
And that's why it's important to have the right partner if you're going to engage in this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree with you. And that's the thing, more often than not, the sexual assault or rape, psychologically what that does is it takes your power away, or it feels like, they've taken your power away from you, because in that act you feel, very powerless. And to be able to kind of reclaim that is a very empowering process.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's awesome hearing the stories that have been using this in a good way, because let's face it, kink and BDSM get a lot of negative attention, a lot of negative press.
Yes.
But
and that's unfair.
Absolutely unfair. But again, you've got to take every single safety procedure that you can.
Yes.
If you're going to go through this, because it can. There are triggers that happen.
Yep.
In any scene, and a lot of people don't know what their triggers are because it's so deep seated inside of them, or they've forgotten about it, and then a certain thing that somebody does can bring it straight to the forefront again. So you've got to always be very, very careful around those sorts of things, and when they happen, you've got to have the right person there. As soon as you call your safe word, they stop, and it goes into that safe space straight away.
Mm-hmm.
I can't enforce that enough upon anybody. Like, that's just such a massive thing.
It's just foundation, isn't it? it's foundational to have that trust and that, care for each other. And absolutely.
But even this is why I find communities good when it comes to kink, because you can get references, for lack of a better term, from other people within that group about how this person is, how they play, what's their, talk to ex-partners of the people you're going to play with and see what they're like, see what their positives and negative sides are.
I was thinking it would be a good idea to have reviews like that on Tinder or like other dating apps. Reviews from your previous exes as to what their experience dating you was like.
I believe that can go into the bullying side of things a little too easily for me, though.
True. Yeah. But you'd hope that there would be people out there that would be truthful about the experiences and be able to talk about that.
My concern with that is, like, you do see a lot of couples squabbling on Facebook and things like, or ex-couples squabbling on Facebook and stuff like that. So you can imagine one partner, getting all of their friends to go onto their ex's profile and leave all of these bad reviews and stuff. So
that's very true.
That would be my concern with that one.
Yeah, that's where the maturity should come in, shouldn't it?
Well, you would think so, but
yeah.
A lot of people aren't mature. So we'll move on to the final point, and this is one that I ask pretty much every guest that comes on at some point as we go through it all. So for anybody who has been assaulted, whether it be, and I guess it would be different, so it's kind of a two-part answer, or two-part question. What advice could you give to somebody who has been assaulted, whether it be recently or even a fair amount of time ago? Is there a difference? Or,
No difference.
No difference.
No difference. I think if it's something that you've just realised, or, if it's just something that's just happened and you realise, the effects are still going to be there. The time, unless once you've been, actively working on it and working through the effects, etc., it's not going to change the way you respond, to it. Like, it's okay to feel upset even if it happened 10 years ago or 20 years ago, whatever it is. There's nothing there that's going to be there and be like, oh, well, that happened like so long ago. Why are you still upset about it? Because you know what? I actually have clients who have been in denial for a long time, subconsciously or not consciously in denial, and then suddenly it just hits them like a train and they're just kind of like, oh gosh, I've been raped, and that, what, your feelings are valid. Whatever you're feeling, please don't compare it to other people because they're not you. They're not, your journey is very unique. And I think people need to know that. And one big thing that I want to say, and this is something that I feel like we all need to, shout out from the rooftops, is that it's not your fault.
Absolutely.
And that's the massive thing.
So with this then, if, say for example, we talked about the ACC stuff at the top of this. Is it possible for somebody, when it's been 20 odd years, to still go and they've only just realised, or they've just come out of that relationship? Or it's been 20 years since something, this assault has occurred. Are they still able to go and claim?
Yes. From my knowledge, yes, you can. It's past trauma, so not past, sorry, that is long term. I think it's I forget the term. I think it's something like periodic trauma or something like that. But yes, it's if anyone and everyone that's been abused or assaulted can apply for the support.
And arguably should apply.
Yes, I completely agree. Yes.
So,
it's a resource that's there, use it. It's there for a reason, and I think it's great that it is there, so please use it.
And that goes for anyone and everyone who even thinks that it could have happened. They're not sure if what they've experienced is a sexual assault. Like I said, the indecent touching in a bar or something like that could still leave a lasting effect.
Absolutely. Like, what I normally say is that, we all have really strong gut feelings. And if your gut's telling you that something's not right, it's probably because it isn't.
Yeah.
And it's scary listening to our gut because we don't want to, admit to it sometimes. But if there is something that feels like it's clashing within you, that's probably because it is.
Yeah.
And even if, your long-term support or short-term support doesn't get approved because of one reason or another, it doesn't fit the criteria. From my knowledge and experience, I think you'll still be allowed those first 6 sessions to be able to discuss this.
And figure out what could happen going forward, right?
Thanks. Yeah. That's my experience of it anyway. Yeah. I think the only issue would be if it happens overseas, or if you don't have, actually, you know what, I'm not going to say that, because I think if there's any question for you, I think you should just reach out and see what kind of support you can get.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. So even if you've been, so you're a New Zealand citizen, you live here, you've been away on holiday, something happens over there, you come back, you're still
you can
good.
apply. Yeah.
And that's really cool as well. Yeah, just before we leave, I just remembered one thing to touch on, is that especially with that incessant touching, I guess, for lack of a better term, the hand on the butt in a club, or things like that. And I'm speaking to the people that do these sorts of actions at this point, is that you're affecting how the person you're doing it to is going to act in future. You're forcing them to change their behaviour so this doesn't happen to them in the future again.
Yeah.
Like we talked about with sex education, the bus ride, it can be, they're not going to go on the dance floor next time they go out to the club because they're sick of getting touched up. They're sick of getting felt up.
Yeah.
And then they're not going to enjoy themselves, which can then lean down to a various number of mental health issues from that point as well. Even just the tiniest action like that can have a massive, massive effect.
Absolutely. I think it's just important for everyone to know that you're not entitled to somebody else's body.
No.
No matter what the surroundings are, the situation is, whatever. Sure, even if you're flirting and they say, no, I'm not okay with that, stop it. Like, that's just it.
It's not difficult. No means no.
It isn't. It's not hard to figure out the body language of someone that's not interested. See,
now that's an interesting one for me, because there are some people who have social development issues that don't notice that. But so sometimes you do need to physically say, please stop.
That's true.
And it's up to the other person to react in, well, what should be the normal way, and just go, okay, sorry, my bad, I didn't mean that.
I think whenever possible, people should just ask. I think.
Yeah. It's not difficult to ask.
And anyone, should feel worried about.
And I ask a lot.
Well, that's good. And that's what it should be like, And anyone in the receiving end of being asked, please don't be embarrassed to say whatever it is. Don't feel like you have to say yes or whatever it is.
Damn straight. Yes.
Absolutely no pressure. It doesn't. And if there's people around you that are putting pressure on you, maybe it's time to think about a new friend circle,
Absolutely.
It might not be the healthiest group that if they are actually pushing you into doing something that you're not comfortable doing.
Yes, I could not agree with that more.
Yeah, because, absolutely there is a difference between a challenge and being pushed into something, and I think people need to recognize that. And not at any point should people look at that as being like, oh, stop being so such a party pooper or whatever it is. Because that's not what it is. You're completely entitled to your body, and you make the decisions for it,
Yeah, I didn't mean to laugh in there, but I was reminded of an episode of Dragon Ball Z Abridged, and there's a little song that it goes, everybody needs a poo-poo, that's why they invited you.
I don't know how you've been triggered with that, but that's cool.
So you said something about being a party pooper.
So okay.
Everybody needs a poo-poo, that's why they invited you. Oh.
Here you go.
Oh, okay then.
I don't actually know what that episode is, so.
But it's on that though, with that pressure thing, it's one of those parts where, you don't want to feel like the party pooper by saying no, but in the interest of your own safety, that it's actually the other person being the party pooper if they take it the wrong way.
Absolutely. Yep.
They're the ones that have ruined everything by not just being, a decent human being.
Yep. Definitely. And that's so important to know for all genders. Sometimes there are, I'm just using the stereotypical examples here. Sometimes if a girl gets rejected, she might turn into start acting like a complete bitch. You know what? Don't do it.
No.
Again, it's not.
Classy is sexy.
You're a female doesn't mean you're entitled to every guy out there to like you or, have to be with you or anything like that. They have their entitlement over their own body in the same way that you do over yours. I think respect, communication, they all need to be just foundations in who we are as human, as a humanity, really.
Yeah, and I think that's the perfect way to end this off, actually. That's really, really cool way to end this off. Is there anything else you wanted to add in at the end of this?
Not really. Thank you so much for opening up a platform for people to be able to talk about this. I think it's so important. And for people out there, if you're wanting support, just reach out, ask around, get the support that you need, because it is there. And I wish you guys all the best, really, and all the best for your podcast as well, Simon. I think you're doing a fantastic job.
Thank you so much. It takes two to tango, so thank you very, very much for coming on and giving us all this great information where people can go and hopefully allowing people to come out of their shell a bit more and talk about this sort of stuff. That's the aim from this. So, yeah, again, thank you so, so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Touch of your lips, dear, but much more for the touch of your whips, dear. You can raise welts like nobody else as we dance to the masochism tango. Say our love is a flame, not an ember. Say it's me that you want to dismember. Blacken my eye, set fire to my tie as we dance to the masochism tango. At your command, before you here I stand. My heart is in my hand, yes. It's here that I must be. My heart entreats, just hear those savage beats, and go put on your cleats and come and trample me. Your heart is hard as stone or mahogany. That's why I'm in such exquisite agony. My soul is on fire, it's aflame with desire, which is why I perspire when we tango. You caught my nose in your left castanet, love. I can feel the pain yet, love, every time I hear drums. And I envy the rose that you held in your teeth, love, with the thorns underneath, love, sticking into your gums. Your eyes cast a spell that bewitches. Last time I needed 20 stitches to sew up the gash you made with your lash as we dance to the masochism tango. Bash in my brain and make me scream with pain, then kick me once again and say we'll never part. I know too well I'm underneath your spell, so darling, if you smell something burning, it's my heart. Don't you take your cigarette from its holder and burn your initials in my shoulder. Fracture my spine and swear that you're mine as we dance to the massacre.